In this video, I'm going to share why I don't like or use the concept of safe spaces. It's potentially dangerous territory, of course, but it would be too ironic if I talked about this topic in a super safe way. I'm Liz Scarf. Welcome to Collaborative Learning for Cultural Repair. Got that right this time. So I'm not going to define safety because I think that's part of the problem, right? But let's just say it's a very subjective experience and is best defined in the relational moment by all who are involved, right? So because who gets to define safety matters a lot, right? So when someone, itchy nose. When someone declares that a space is safe for others, it's a red flag for me, right? And therapists have traditionally done this a lot, telling clients that therapy is a safe space. It's really not. It's actually not meant to be a safe space, but I digress on that, right? But being told that a space is safe, especially if that person has more structural power, actually takes away people's can take away people's capacity to discern for themselves. And it can be a bit gaslighty, right? Oh, they said it was safe and they know better than me, but I don't really feel safe, so there must be something wrong with me. I'll just do it anyway, right? So it can be a bit of a problem like that. And it also fails to account for the complexity of safety, that it's developed over time, that it's relational, and it's very subjective. So when someone declares that they make safe spaces kind of thing, I just tend to assume they haven't thought very critically about safety and then are open to the idea of lots of different implications that could have, right, on what that space will actually be like and anyway, so many tangents, right? It's not a can of worms, it's like a bucket of worms. So another thing just to kind of just pop in here is just to note the expectation of safety, right, is a relatively new cultural phenomena along with the expectation of equality, right? I think they're both great things in some ways, but just to say they're relatively new in Western culture, at least, right? I don't really try to speak for any other cultures. I also wanted to just sprinkle in here this concept of the way safety is used as a justification of the state, right? So justification of the state is a concept about the social deal that we make to have some level of or kind of social organization, right? So it's the trade between complete individual freedoms and collective benefits. And the reason why to have a state apparatus, like why do we have it? What purpose is it serving for us, right? Now, safety and well-being is a more modern, but a very, very powerful justification of the state, because it's very hard to argue against well-being and safety. And so it gets used very commonly and easily to justify state violence, particularly in policing, and also incarceration, right, and breaches of human rights in medicine, particularly in psychiatry. Safety gets operationalized and weaponized in many ways. So it's not just like this neutral, necessarily beneficent concept. It's very political and gets used in a range of different ways. It could be easy to think that's just like in mainstream spaces, but it's actually really similar in the subaltern and social change spaces, right? So the demand, similar patterns happen, right? The demand for safety gets used to justify or excuse some very problematic behaviours and practices, as well, of course, as trying to support more inclusion for socially marginalised voices or roles. Totally. But yes, the desire a fantasy of being completely safe, especially, it's nice, right? Like if we think about moments, if we've ever felt like that subjective experience, like it's really nice. It's very compelling, it's very hypnotizing, very appealing. And more so as life becomes more and more precarious, which I think it really is globally. So it makes sense, and especially for people who've had very intense experiences of being unsafe, fantasies of safety have been life-saving, right? But I'm talking here in the context of a cultural process, not so much individual psychological process. Of course, they're linked. We can say in some ways the same, but sometimes it's important to stay talking at one level of experience rather than jumping around willy-nilly across levels. So I'm going to try and stick with the cultural level mostly here. So The cultural fantasy of safety is problematic in the same way that many foundations of Western culture are problematic, in that they are grounded in abstract, rationalist theories, not in reality, right? So like what I was talking about in my last video, the parent telling the kid, it's normal to get sand on your feet when you're walking on the beach, right? Life is fundamentally not safe. And being able to find a way to live with that is really important. And our brains are really wired for that, right? Like I see sometimes people making a big deal about things that their probability of getting into bother is super, super low, but they don't think twice about getting in a car, which for many people is one of the most unsafe things they will do in their life. And then we do it every day, multiple times a day, right? So in terms of probabilities. So a capacity to marginalize a lack of safety in some ways, we're really good at it actually. So anyway, for me, the issue is more about the differential privileges of safety, right? So protection is one of the privileges of power. The more power you have, the more you are protected from threat, all kinds of threat, right? So working for greater equality so that people with less protection get more protection, I think this is really good work. This is actually the work that matters. But trying to make the world safe and trying to make the spaces we exist in completely safe for us, I think that's really dangerous. It's just another fight with nature that we will ultimately lose. And I don't think it helps us be better animals at all, right? I think it, yeah, let me go on to that. I'm so distractible. But when we set a social goal, right, like safe space, that is only theoretically possible, not actually possible. We then insist on particular practices and behaviours and identities of those around us to try to make that theory a reality. So we're not really just doomed to fail, right? We're generally doomed to oppress. Which links to this idea that maybe has different names in different places, but I'll call it victim rank, right? Victim rank is a way to try to feel powerful. I'm a big supporter of people having power, feeling powerful, using it really well. Different strategies have different cost-benefit ratios in terms of getting power and using it, right? So the victim rank strategy goes a bit like this. I've suffered in so many ways, more than anyone else here, this, and this. Therefore, you all have to do what I say to make things easier or better or safer for me, right? So basically, I'm the biggest victim, do what I say. So the double signal about power is pretty evident, right? I'm a victim, which equals I'm not powerful, because victim is a low rank state of being done to. And then the other part of the statement is do what I say, right? Here's me being powerful is actually what that conveys. And so this like really, it doesn't work very well, right? So here's a little bit why. So demanding safety as a way to be powerful. So using this victim rank it does have huge costs, right? Psychologically for the individual. An identity that is kind of rigidly centering victimhood, I think is incredibly painful and quite devastating for one's own psyche, right? So a good habit to get out of. Of course, it's so much more than a habit. It's very complex. It tends to shrink people's world because only a very specific kind of world is acceptable to people, right? And that's not even what happens, right? You could have everything is how you want it, but then how are you getting to continually express power? You have to keep changing the demands, actually. You have to keep being demanding to keep getting a hit of power to sort of soothe the ways in which you don't feel powerful. So you can never really get that perfect world anyway. So it just continually shrinks. And the last thing is it has a huge impact on the quality of relationships because it's a very irritating use of power. The double signal, right? Double signals like that are just always irritating. And it turns people into dictators, kind of, because they're trying to take away other people's free will and their right to participate in ways that work for them with a kind of morality manipulation. So there's no relationality, there's no negotiation. It is, very authoritarian as a way to try to be in the world. And I'd say the safe space movement has a lot of this going on, actually. Now, somebody who's explored this quite a bit is Dr. Vivienne, who is an academic, a Melbourne-based academic and CEO of Transgender Victoria. And they've published a book, Queering Safe Spaces. It's an excellent book, and I'm also pulling a face because I'm sorry, it's a hugely expensive book because it's an academic book. I really want to recommend it, and it's so rude to recommend a really expensive book. I don't know how to get around that, because I also just really want to say this book's awesome. So campaign your local library for one. I was lucky to get one as a review copy. I will be donating it to the Anne's Pop Library. I'll put a link below. Anyway, there are so many things I could share from this book, and maybe I should do more videos about it. But just one thing from there that I've paraphrased a little bit, just so I want to sort of sum up, it's towards the end of the book. My son says, instead of demanding compliant behaviour or definitively promising a safe environment, we need to work together to navigate the continually shifting boundary between fear and courage, discomfort and security, trauma and resilience, not as binary processes, but as processes of becoming. Now, even just in that, there's like a lot. I think the essences of it for me, though, is about safety is an ongoing relational process, and don't expect it to feel good all the time. A lot of the time it's going to be feeling like hard work. It's going to be uncomfortable. So I think it's really rich. And there's a promise in there too, or like, for me at least, I feel like this invitation to understand that it's a growthful space too, as a process of becoming together. I just think, I'm growing and learning together with others in this space. So it's it's quite compelling to me. So Sun also draws our attention to one alternative that's been articulated, which Sun critiques a little, and I want to critique even more. It's this concept of brave spaces. So I also think these are problematic. Now, Sun quotes somebody else's work here, and I'll put the citation in the show notes. So brave spaces are qualitatively distinct from safe spaces. With safe spaces, ground rules and expectations of tone and process are established to moderate emotions and minimise conflict to approximate an ideal of safety. In contrast, brave spaces are environments that invite interactions in which participants feel able to be honest, candid, self-disclosing, and generally genuine with one another. Okay, so I love the sound of it, right? I love the invitation to step into spaces with authenticity and power in vulnerability, right? To not to expect a space to not involve vulnerability. But I think the concept is problematic for 3 reasons. The first one's a bit pedantic, but I'll say it anyway, right? No one feels brave, right? When you're doing brave or courage, you feel scared. Like bravery is being scared and acting anyway, right? Or doing the thing anyway. So no one feels brave. It's not a particularly rich argument. Second one's a bit better. Courage is impacted by privilege, right? So if I'm going to turn up into a space, my capacity for courage is going to be predicated on my educational history. Did I get to eat breakfast? How was my sleep? Do I look like the other people in the room, the majority of the other people in the room? Do they also sound like me? How much experience have I had in groups? I've got some really nice people who I live with who can support me if I feel really uncomfortable afterwards, and I've got a great therapist, and I have whole bunches of resources that make it super easy, actually, or much, much easier for me to be courageous in a space, right? Otherwise, privilege can impact on courage. And so a brave space versus safe space doesn't really do an awful lot, I don't think, to address the differences of privilege around safety versus courage, right? They're both impacted by privilege. They don't really do a lot to equalise the field a little more. I also think it can set up a framework that inhibits diversity of participation. So what if I want to come to the space, but I don't want to have to do anything brave? I'd really be happy just to kind of lurk, feel like I'm part of things, but I don't really want to go outside my comfort zone today because I didn't sleep well and I didn't have any food, but I still want to be here. Can I still be welcome, right? So there's a way in which it's kind of like this pressure to like do your best. It's like, I can't always do my best, but it doesn't mean I want to be at home on my own, right? So and there's also, of course, different cultural ways of being together that can also get kind of dominated or excluded if we set spaces up with this kind of requirement to be brave kind of thing. So what do I do instead? Okay, so this is an ongoing learning process for me, as it is for anybody else. I don't think that I'm ahead of the game. This is just where I think about, how I think about it at the moment. It's also, you know, got its own problems, right? But these days I go with this concept of a safe enough space. So is the space safe enough for people to participate in ways that achieve the stated objective of that space, right? So there's kind of two main parts in that, and I'll give an example. So I teach a course called Trauma-Informed Facilitation. My safety goal for that group is that I want it to be safe enough for people who facilitate groups to learn about how to make spaces more trauma-informed and what to do when someone gets triggered in a group, right? So the two main elements, the audience, like who are the participants, and the learning objective, right? What's the point of the space? Right, so my audience is not everyone. I'm not setting up a space that everyone will feel safe in. And people actually have to go through some criteria to kind of, you know, self-assess, is this an appropriate space for them at this time in their life, right? So the second part, the learning objective, is clear. And there's no therapeutic objective, right? We're learning about how to make trauma-informed spaces and what to do when someone gets triggered in a group. It's not a space to share your own trauma experiences. Excuse me. There's no... we're not here to center personal healing work, right? If I was just designing a space like that, it would look hugely different. So this idea of a generic safe space, and even if I try to make this a safe space, you know, it's got to be, it just doesn't work. It's too rigid. It has to also have certain kinds of elements that that help constrain and shape the space. So if you're also kind of tasked with thinking about or creating safe spaces for yourself or others, or you want to contribute more to safety or understand why you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in some spaces, thinking about who the space is for, like who's this space been designed for, and what is the space for? They're really important criteria for thinking about what safe enough could look like, right? If it's not clear who this space has been designed for, it's quite possible people have either done no design or very little design thinking, or they've tried to design it for everybody, and that is usually going to make it a bit unsafe actually, or less safe. And being clear, what's the space for, right? If the space is for this, but you're coming along with this other thing you want, like, don't expect it to feel safe enough, right? Because like you've already come in conflict with the intention of whoever's organised the space. Vice versa, if you're an organiser and you've got participants. So the clarity about these things matters, right? The other thing that I currently do, instead of declaring a space safe or even declaring that it's safe enough, I tend to just try to explain some of the ways, the strategies that I have to try to make the space safer. And then I just invite people to use their own discernment about what feels safe enough for them. I do this in my therapeutic work too, right? You know, these ideas of like, is it safe enough to stay in the room? Is it safe enough to be open to listening to others? Is it safe enough to contribute your own ideas? Is it safe enough to share vulnerable personal information? Is it safe enough to leave? You know, like it's all making space for people to consider and contribute to making spaces safer. It's actually a huge part of what actually makes them safer, partly because the sense of agency is a big part of safety, because why we see it kind of overexpressed in victim rank, right? But it is the negotiation of the space is, I think, the thing that helps make it more safe. Not sort of saying, we do this and we do this and we do this, bang, it's safe. It's like, we need to collaborate about how is this going to work for everyone who's in the room, right? Is this the right place? So there's that negotiation, I think, is key to safety. Anyway, it's obviously hugely more complicated than that. They're just a few thoughts I have about it at the moment. And I think that'll do for now. So I've really just sort of poked at a few ideas about safe spaces. I know there's heaps more, and as always, I would love to hear your thoughts about the concept of safe spaces in the comments. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.